had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Happy Friday, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. That, of course, means time for another episode of Cello Chat. Super excited to have with me today Elliot Yang. Elliot, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm super glad to hear that. We've had a number of people on this program of various ages, including your age, and it's just there are enough people who watch the show that are also younger that I think I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on some of these questions, as the young folks watching may be able to relate more to you as a result.
Sure, absolutely.
So how about would you start with your whole life story? How did why cello in the first place, and what was the musical path that took you to where you are now?
Well, it's funny because I actually I didn't choose to play cello. My two older sisters, they played. My parents, actually, going back even further, my parents met in a youth orchestra. So, I mean, thank God for youth orchestras, right? I mean, else I wouldn't. I mean, I'm really happy that they existed. but um, but yeah, my two older sisters, my oldest sister played the violin and still does from time to time. Not professionally, but she started when she was 3. And then my second oldest sister, she played the piano. And then we all studied with the Cartman family. So I'm sure you're familiar with Stefan Cartman at University of Milwaukee. And so we would all have our lessons at the same time. My sister would study with Myron Cartman upstairs. And then my other sister studied with Jeannie Yu. And then I had my lessons with Stefan in the basement. And that was kind of three birds with one stone, I suppose. Worked out really well every Saturday. But I think the idea behind that was my parents wanted us to play in a piano trio. So that's why they gave me the cello, and I'm really happy that they did, because I stuck with it. My sisters, they're doing different things, but you know, I was the one that stuck with music. But I studied with Stefan for man, let's see, started lessons with him when I was 6.5. And then I studied with him for the next 12 years. So he was really my only teacher for a while. And he taught me everything that I knew at the time. So I was really lucky to have a teacher like Stefan, because he's just such a phenomenal pedagogue, and also just an incredible musician and cellist. So I was really spoiled having such fantastic teachers. So I called Stefan last week, actually, because after I passed my defense, I guess I'm Dr. Yang now, which kind of sounds weird. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of things going on. But it's going to take some getting used to that. But I tell my students to just call me by first name basis. It's always easiest, and keeps things a little bit more informal. And you know, that's how I the relationship was with all of my teachers. It was always on a first name basis. So I kind of figured that that's what's comfortable. So after I studied with Stefan for 12 years, I went to Peabody Conservatory for my undergraduate studies, where I studied with Amit Peled. And that was very, very different. Baltimore, new city, and a completely different teacher. But Amit studied with Uri Vardi, who's a cellist over in Madison.
Yeah.
He's a professor in Madison, and I know that Uri Vardi is very much influenced. I think he's a Feldenkrais practitioner, actually. So I did have a lesson with Uri Vardi when I was auditioning for schools when I was 17, 18 years old. And I still remember the lesson I had with him. And I remember every time I shift, my head would go down. And then he said, can you try the opposite? Can you actually try doing this? And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. But I think the Feldenkrais is very interesting because it's a awareness through motion, right? I actually have that's actually the title of the book, Awareness Through Motion. So the reason why I bring that up is because Amit I can definitely see the influence from Uri Vardi with studying with Amit, because Amit is all about using your body in an optimal way. He calls them, well, at the time he called them the 7 commandments of cello playing, but I think there's 10 now since I graduated, which I think is very interesting. But I think that was a totally different way of playing and practicing. And I remember I had to play a 1-octave D major scale for my entire first semester when I was there. And I couldn't play any repertoire until the scale was really up to his standard. So that was a totally different mindset to have. But you know, I'm so lucky to have studied with him, and I still call him. He's like family. So really, really thankful to Amit and kind of getting into that sort of soloist mindset. It was very interesting. And then for my graduate studies, I went on to Arizona State University, where I studied with Tom Lanchute. So I did my master's in performance there, and also just finished my doctorate. So that was really a very long process. Well, I mean, 2 degrees, but Arizona is also home for me, so my family is also here. So that was really just a great experience. I learned a lot of repertoire and a lot of popper etudes, and I think that was a real you know, eye-opening experience, because I remember the first couple studio classes, Tom Lanchute said, "Okay, everyone, so every week, everyone has to play a new popper etude from memory. Everybody. It's just that's his thing." And I remember thinking, every week a new one, man, that's crazy, you know, because I was used to just sitting in the practice room and maybe, you know, really polishing things, and of course it has to be at a high level. But I think that kind of preparation really whipped me into shape. And yeah, so that was kind of scary, playing for a room full of cellists, popper etudes from memory, which they've all played. But you know, I think, you know, that's what studio classes are for, and performance class and technique class. So, you know, if you can play for a room of cellists, you can play for anybody.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So yeah, that's all. I think all 3 of them very different with their approach. But I think the thing that they all have in common is they all practice what they preach.
Nice.
So all 3 of them, they really believe in what they do, and also not only teaching but also in performance. They really believe what it is that that they're teaching, and when they perform, and it's just very honest music making. I think all 3 of them. So I think one of the most important things that I learned is just to be yourself, and that'll come across in your teaching as well.
For sure. Excellent. Well, and so how does Dr. Yang's teaching, how is it similar to how you were taught, and how does it build on your teacher's approaches?
It's a good question. I think that is the tendency for a lot of people, isn't it? To teach the way they were taught, because that's what they know at first. And that's certainly true with me. I started teaching kind of almost taking the words out of my teacher's mouth, always giving them credit, of course, especially if I quote them. But I found very quickly that it wasn't as effective as it was for my students as it was for me. So I found that I had to find my own voice as a teacher as well. So just repackaging the same information in that my teachers had shown me, I think it was not enough. So I quickly realized that I had to really meet the students where they were at. And each student is totally different from one another. They have very different interests, of course, different ages. I've taught everyone from 4 years old until I think the oldest person I taught was 76 years old. So I've been teaching for over 10 years now, and I am learning a lot. I think you realize how much you don't know as a teacher the more you do it. But I think the first step is really getting to know my students first. So finding out what they're excited about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about cello. So for example, now she's 5. She was 4 when she started, but my youngest student is 5 years old, and she loves Frozen, the cartoon, which is about 10 years old at this point, which is kind of crazy to me. But her favorite character is Elsa, and kids that age, there's no filter, so whatever they think, it just comes out. So that's a lot of fun. My niece is the same age as her. Well, she's I think a year older now. But I think what I did was I got her stickers, these Frozen stickers, right? And these are like really serious stickers. They're like the ones you put on the side of your water bottle and laptop. They're very, very high quality stickers. And I found that she just lit up whenever there was some kind of prize involved. But I find that was very helpful for the younger students. For older students, I mean, boys, they're not really interested in stickers, but they do love candy. I mean, that's when I learned that was huge. So the day after Halloween, I was definitely at Target, picking up all sorts of candy for my kids. But of course, that's just one example, right? But finding what they're excited about, and really just asking them questions. How was your week? It's what gets you excited? What's your favorite sports team? This sort of thing. And they really just open up from then. And I think that's really the first step. And then after that, I try to find out what their goals are, what they want to do with cello, and who inspires them, right? If they have any cellists, why did you want to start playing the cello? Kind of very similar to what you asked me, right? But I think seeing that and really meeting where they're at, a lot of the common responses are like, "Oh, I love this one cellist, but I can't remember their names."
No.
well, does he look like this? And it's multiple choice, and I have a whole picture and like 5, maybe 10 of the greatest cellists. You got Jacqueline Dupre and Janos Starker. I mean, do any of these guys ring a bell? Like any of them? And then they're like, "No, it's not any of those. Those are all in black and white." So I said, "Oh, well, who is it?" And they said, "No, it's the 2 cellos. I just couldn't remember their names." I was like, "Oh, right, of course." But but if that's a starting point for them, that's great.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
But I do recommend, hey, you should listen to this. You should listen to these recordings. Hey, listen to Rostropovich. Listen to Jacqueline Dupre. I mean, just such incredible. Listen to Stephen Isserlis. I love Stephen Isserlis. So I give them homework. I give them listening assignments. Yeah, for sure. And then they start asking me, "Oh, I want to learn that. I want to learn that." And even though it might be too early for some of them to be learning some of these pieces, I say, well, we'll come back to that. Make sure that you don't forget. That's great. that's something that you want to learn, and that makes me really happy as a teacher. And then that really motivates them too. That, and I find competitions are incredible motivators as well. So especially for the students that are a little bit more serious, a little bit older, who have been playing for maybe 2 to 3 years, if not a little bit longer, I try to really push them to prepare for competitions, and of course it's a different level of preparation. But I find that, students really just start progressing and they start practicing on their own. And I think if you can find those kind of motivations to kind of push like where you can, then they start to become self-motivated, which is the ultimate goal.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Well, that was a perfect segue from kind of like approach to teaching to then the motivation question that I always ask. And of course, it's wonderful when the motivation component is so important. It's great when it's just baked into everything, as it sounds like it clearly is. I wonder, as kind of a follow-up, we all seem to have, or so many people, at least either a short time in their life or maybe a broader time where they feel like they're spinning their wheels, or for whatever reason, they have a harder time making themselves get the instrument out and do the heavy lifting that needs to be done to get a piece to the next level. Do you have some additional kind of either philosophy or words of thought about how to help those students in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell them that that practicing is kind of like working out. I like how you said heavy lifting. Because I mean, for me, I never really found the idea of working out to be it's not very attractive. But this morning I kind of had to convince myself as well. I went for the first time in a while. So it's on my mind today. But I always tell my students the hardest part about working out is going.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same is true with cello playing. The hardest part is just getting the instrument out. That's why my instrument's always out. So it's just, I can just pick it up and play. And just getting in the chair is the hardest part, because I always tell them, once you start, it's not so bad, and you actually kind of enjoy it, right? And it's sort of like a game, right?
Yeah.
Today let's try to do these three. Let's try to learn like the exposition, and then we're just gonna either work on whatever it is that if it's shifting or kind of slow practice. I'm a really big slow practice guy. Just really giving them fewer things to focus on, right, to make it more manageable. And then I actually divide that up into each day that they practice. So I make a practice schedule for them. So I say, okay, Mondays you're going to practice, these arpeggios. You're going to practice the minor, the major, the augmented arpeggios, and then you're going to do this and this, but it's not too much. It's very manageable. And then everything is noted. I take notes every lesson, and I make sure that they take notes as well. Usually their parents do it, but I really try to get the student to do that, so that I just treat it like a class, and it's like any other class at school. So I believe that there should never really be a moment where the student is in the practice room and they think, what should I work on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That should never happen. And I think if it's really organized in that way, with each day what to work on, and I always tell them, hey, if you miss a day, don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do about that day. It's gone. You just focus on today, and you focus on tomorrow. And usually that works for a lot of students, because I would be so rich if I had a nickel every time my student said, oh, I didn't practice this week because, and I'm just like, oh. But it's okay. I really try to tell them, that's not really what's important. All that really matters is, what you do today, what you do tomorrow. And I think that kind of mindset is and mindset of having a short memory is good for students.
That's a good philosophy. Short memory with respect to that, long memory with respect to, the takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, so let's see. I think I remember your one of the concerto competitions you won, and I think it was maybe the Asta one. Hearing you play, I mean, I know it was a little while ago, but since then you have some of your performances available on YouTube. People can hear for themselves just how beautiful your playing is, and you polish to a level not just to play beautifully for an audience, but in some ways um, audiences are one thing, but it's an entirely different beast to go and win competitions and win auditions. So what are some of your what's some of your advice for taking a piece that a student feels is already really, really good and getting it even better still?
Well, thank you for the kind words. Really, really appreciate it. That's now that I found an old email from I think your Asta comments from
All right.
2008. I think, yeah. So in case you were wondering, that was, yeah. I think I must have. Oh my gosh, I never deleted it, so I must have been very important to me. But let's see. For competitions for students that are kind of on the cusp, right, and to really improving and taking that next step, I think one of the most important things is, well, my answer is in two parts. The first half, I think, is to record yourself, and that's just critically important, because you start hearing yourself a little more objectively, and I think when the cello is under our ear, and we start to grow to like whatever we're doing. So it's like you get used to it. I mean, my teacher used to describe it. My teacher being Amit, it just came to my mind. He would say, "Oh, if you eat chocolate ice cream every day, I mean, it's delicious, but you start to grow numb to it. Then it's not. You need some variety." So I think when we play the same passage, and especially if we practice the same way, which I think is kind of the root of the issue. I think if we practice the same way, and we hear kind of the same way, we need to sort of take a step back and record ourselves. If you can record yourself in a hall, have the microphone in different locations, have it in the back of the hall, have it in the worst spot you can possibly think of, like under the curtain or something, right? Under a shelf, something, right? And try to play for the microphone, and I think you will play differently. So that's my first comment, is to record yourself. And before I jump to the second half of that, my answer, I think try to also be objective with the feedback you give yourself. It's, I think, common for students to think, "Oh, I listen to the recording, and I'm just the worst cellist in the world." Like, no, you're not. So I think just take notes on what is actually good, what you do very well. That's very important to write down when and listen to the score, and write down things that are good. That's very important. And then also things that you can work on. So you have sort of two lists, and therefore from that list you can compile a list of priorities of what are things that need my immediate attention, and what are things that maybe I can get to in the latter half of my practice sessions. So again, it's all about the application. It's all about how do I implement these changes in the practice room, right?
Yeah.
Because I actually tell my students, you don't get better in the you don't get better in the lessons, but you get better the other 6 days of the week when I don't see you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's absolutely the case. Because at the end of the day, again, I'll quote Amit. He said, "At the end of the day, it's four walls and your cello figuring it out."
That's a
Isn't
great,
that true? I mean,
yeah.
it's it, and after having left Peabody, I was a freshman. Oh gosh, it's 11 years ago at this point, I think. But time really flies. It feels like yesterday. But but that's really true. I mean, all the things that he was teaching me, they suddenly make sense now. You know, when I've been removed from it and I've had time to process things. Um, so yeah, so that's what I would say. So record, but also apply from what you're learning from the recording. Um, let's see. The second half of my answer, the first half is recording, and then the second half of my answer would probably be to um, would be to would be to practice much slower. However, um, how and very very slow, but also with the intention of becoming more comfortable on stage. I think because I think being trying to play perfect and having this mindset like, oh, I can't make any mistakes, oh, I can't miss a shift, or I can't do that, then that's the wrong kind of mindset. I always tell my students that whatever mindset you have in the practice room, you're actually practicing that mindset. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I can't mess up, or I can't make any, or I have to play perfect, then that's you're going to be nervous on stage because you're actually practicing being nervous.
Well, and the reverse too is that if they kind of have a complacent attitude in the practice room of
Right.
just doing mundane things, then it's such a system shock
Mm-hmm.
when finally, kind of like the awareness of having not gotten in the habit of thinking about the performing of it, then they don't necessarily react well on stage then either.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, I I realized that there was one more thing I was going to add. Forgive me. Um, but oh yeah, that's right. Practicing slow. So I find that the slow practice, um, even when I practice slow, I'm very 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 I'm very precise. So I think with the especially with the fingers, for example, left hand. If I practice in a really slow tempo, I'll tell students to do that, and I'll kind of find that their hand actually kind of moves in slow motion. And then I'm thinking, no, 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 play with strong fingers, even when you're practicing in a slow tempo, right? Because something about the strong fingers in the left hand. That's just one example. That our brains really learn much better from that kind of decisive motion and execution. So ultimately, I think what the slow practice is aiming to do is to make you more comfortable on stage, you know. And I would much rather prefer a student be comfortable than, you know, than feeling like they have to perform or win the competition. That's the worst kind of mindset you can have. But if you're comfortable on stage and you accept that mistakes will happen, um, because they will. They will happen. I mean, there's times where you're going to miss the big shift or you're going to forget how it goes. That's going to happen. I mean, you're a human being after all. And I think the sooner you can accept that and really aim for comfort and playing at a high level and changing that mindset, then I think the freer you become, which is kind of ironic, but it really is the case. Um, so I've had so many lessons, both as a student and as a teacher, where after just not getting something for 55 minutes, the last 5 minutes, I just give up and I say, okay, like this. Or the student does that and it's perfect. I'm like, yeah, like that, do that, yes, because they're relaxed. And then there's the so they're not trying to make things happen anymore. They kind of just allow them to happen, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. Yeah, the slow practice gives you a chance to be aware of how everything feels, and get your thoughts in order from action to action. Yeah, for sure. A lot of wisdom in there. Very full of great takeaways.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I think also about a couple other things come to mind. I remember, like, in terms of the making the two lists, here's what could be improved, but here's what went well. So it's not just a beat myself up kind of a thing. The record,
Right, right.
it
Yeah, and I
has,
find students are, I mean, there's, I've almost never found it necessary to beat a student up, so to speak, or berate a student. I mean, it's never necessary because usually they're hard enough on themselves already. So, I mean, and also I've struggled too. I mean, I even though I had some success when I was younger with competitions, I never did third, sixth octaves I never did them when I was in high school.
hmm.
And it was only until I went to a conservatory and then was told to leave my pride at the door and then just start over. And that's why I did those one octave scales. And I really, reason why I say my teachers practice what they preach, especially Amit. I mean, all of them do. I mean, Stefan is probably one of the hardest working musicians. He practices like he's still preparing for international competitions, And of course, Tom Landshut is just. I mean, it's just the level of preparation that he does is just absolutely astounding. But I I remember Amit was really the first time that I saw that level of um, that commitment. It was a really eye-opening experience for me because um, he made me do six. He introduced me to thirds, combined double stops. Um, it was always a skill check with him. It was, can you do it like this? Can you do it like that? Can you play the sixth and then the fourth and then the octave and then the sixth again? And then can you go all the way up the cello and all the way down and do that again? So it was overwhelming, but I learned that he wakes up at 4:30 in the morning and he practices scales for an hour. And he said, I have to do that or else I don't feel I'm really playing to my capability. And my 18-year-old brain just exploded from that. And I thought to myself, I was crazy because I thought to myself, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do whatever it takes. So I, being the very eager freshman that I was, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and went down to the practice rooms and did my scales. And then I remember my roommate was saying, "What are you doing up at this hour? Go to sleep." And I was like, "No, my day is just starting." So I did that. I did that for about a semester because I had nothing else to practice other than scales. So I kind of figured it was the perfect time. But I'm really glad that I did, right? Because it really changed my way of thinking. And every time I tell my students, they're always really nervous because they're scared I'm going to tell them to do that. But I say, no. I mean, I'm not telling you to wake up at 4:30 every morning, but just I share that story with them just to show them that there's a connection between all the scales and all these things that I assign them and the pieces that they play. And I didn't understand that connection until that point. And I'm still learning it actually. Um, but I tell my students, I'm not trying to be a mean cello dictator and assign all of these Cosmin exercises and Foyard and you name it. But the reason why I do that is really because I try to teach the way I wish I was taught when I wish I started those things when I was 5, 6 years old. Of course, everyone does, but I try to implement really the scales and the solid technique right from the very beginning, especially when they're 4, when they're 5, and I find that even the bow hold, right, and just
Yeah.
just imitating that and really starting, just with the basic exercises in the middle of the stick, and just really getting them to look like a cellist, right? And doing these pinky push-up exercises here, 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 and you flip the bowl around, and then you do it here if you're really strong, and this kind of thing. It's something that I sort of envy my students for. I wish I had that knowledge, but I can't go back. I can't change any of that. But what I can do is I can share all of that. I can share all of that with my students, and I think that's really where the motivation comes from. It's really to help them, and really just to encourage them to be the best cellist that they can be.
Terrific. That's tremendous. I want to go back to one thing, the thing about placing the mic in all different places in the hall.
Yeah.
It brings to mind a conversation I had with Phyllis Young at some point, kind of like, I guess, just in a nutshell, it was kind of one of those where, which is better to get used to kind of hearing yourself in, like a stairwell where you sound like $1,000,000 no matter what you do, your tone is amazing, or just in those recording studio where everything is cork and it sucks all the sound away and you just sound totally, what you hear is what you get in terms of string noise and everything. And kind of again, to make a long story short, the answer was both. That we benefit from hearing those times where it can just be so easy and you just get this sound that just rings and rings. So you kind of are setting that as the bar, that's the gold standard. But then we also can't, there's going to be performing situations where you go out into that hall and your ear just like, no, that's not the sound I want. And it can be debilitating to sit there and fight with your own tone the whole time and not realize, no, that's just what I'm hearing. What gets out in the hall is ringing. So it was just interesting about placing the idea of place the mic everywhere under the curtains.
I mean, I'm crazy like that because I've done that.
That's
Because
wild.
I think I was very curious, right? I think I'm more curious now than I ever have been before. I mean, I want to know. I mean, like I said, the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know, right? And I think it's easy to kind of feel discouraged from that, but I think it's actually a positive thing, because when that makes you very curious on, oh, what if it's like this, or what if I place it here, what if I place it in the left side, what if I place it stage right, this kind of thing. But not just to answer the microphone question, but also just in rehearsal, or with when I'm playing chamber music. And I think that curiosity can also is one of the most powerful things that you can have as an artist. Because when someone else makes a comment, I think really being curious, oh, I wonder what they're hearing, right? I wonder what it is that they're hearing in their inner ear, or what they're imagining the sound to be. And I think the more and more I play, the more I realize that the curiosity is really the key.
Wow. Yet more inspiration. That's great. But I do have one more question, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
The pieces that have commissioned pieces, pieces written for you, how was that process? How was it, just kind of the setting it up and the interacting with living composers? Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. I feel like I've time traveled to my defense again. But that was a labor of love, that entire project. I was, I think, sitting in my in my room. It's been a while since I've set up the Zoom camera and everything, so I had to go back to the memory bank and remember my settings. But that was quite an experience, right? I mean, that feels like a lifetime ago. But that was an experience that we all went through. But not being able to make music with friends. I mean, I love chamber music, of course. but just meeting through Zoom and then recording into a digital audio workspace and just layering things. It was. I'm proud of the recordings that we made, my string quartet, but it just had to be. It just had to be precise. It had to be together, and then I missed the collaboration. I missed talking about ideas and bouncing that off. So that's really where the idea came from to commission the works, and all the composers are friends of mine from different stages of my life. So I couldn't make chamber music, but I could commission and really talk and rehearse, so to speak, with other brilliant musicians. Of course, those composers are Sean Head, um, who I actually met through MISO, through Milwaukee Youth Symphony Orchestra. He wrote many pieces for Milwaukee Youth Symphony, and I stayed in contact with him, and he's living in Japan now, which is kind of crazy. I mean, the Zoom meeting times, there's like a very small window that we could find, but that was just fantastic. Then the other two composers, Nick Dalworth, who I met at Peabody, is a very, very good friend of mine, and Bill Clay, who's here, based in Tempe, Arizona. But I asked them all to write music in response to COVID, so I kept it very open-ended, and I wanted to see what they would come up with. There was so many layered recordings that people had done, and and commission projects, and I thought to myself, why not me? Why not start my own project? And so that's what I did. I just decided this is a great opportunity. I mean, I miss making music, and I just decided to go for it. And that was, believe it or not, that was 2 years ago when I reached out to them. So the actual writing process took from discussing the concept to premiering the works, because I played all of the composer's works in a recital in November of 2022. And then, so that was exactly a year ago. And then from then I wrote the paper, which basically talks about the process. But I think the music that they wrote was just very powerful, and something that I wanted to express as a human being. And also it gave the composers an opportunity to express in music what they had experienced. So the music was very powerful. I wouldn't say it's exactly easy listening, but all the links to the recordings are available on my SoundCloud. But yeah, that whole process, being able to make music with friends and expand, I guess, our repertoire for solo cello, that was really something. It kind of shocked me that the solo cello repertoire outside of the Bach suites, for many scholars, it begins with the Kodai Sonata. So you have the Bach suites, and then 200 years of basically nothing.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. I mean, and then you have Kodai. It's just 1915 who writes this just monumental work, right? And then you see all of the other other solo pieces that just roll in. But there's really, outside of the Bach suites, maybe just a little over 100 years of music written for our instrument, for solo cello, that is. And that's really something. And I told the committee that, and the non-cellists were like, is that true? Is that true? So then they turned to Professor Lanchu and they said, Professor Lanchu, can you confirm, is that true? And he's like, yep, that's true. But it's kind of, I know, I mean, they couldn't believe it, but that's the case. So I think commissioning new works It was so much fun, and it's something that I think our instrument needs. We need more works written for our instrument. And it's really just an exceptional product that they created. And the works that they wrote were just way beyond my expectations. So I'm very, very proud of that project and how it turned out.
Well, this has been great fun. Now, with your defense over with, were there kind of other projects waiting in the wings for that moment? What's coming down the pike for you in the rest of the calendar or academic year?
Let's see. I feel like I'm on the Hot Ones TV show, where they eat chicken wings and stuff. But never mind. But what's next? Let's see. Well, some of the pieces. One of the pieces that I commissioned called Persistent, which is written by Bill Clay. We're actually working on finishing the final movement of that work, and premiering it at the Oh My Ears Festival. It's a local festival here in Tempe. So there's a performance of that coming up. I'm also planning on flying to Japan to perform Sean's piece in his hometown, because I promised him I would do that. So I guess I have to go to Japan. I mean, I guess I made a promise, so, oh darn, no, but that's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. I've always wanted to go, but he lives in Nara, Japan. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. So, outside of those two, I am also applying to teach at universities. So I'm looking into some schools near and far. So that's very exciting. Yeah. But for the moment, let's see, graduation is next month. But then I think just catching up with family and seeing people again, which is kind of nice. When you're writing a paper, as you probably know, it takes some serious hours at the computer and many revisions. But I think catching up with friends and family is what I'm doing right now. But those are my short and long-term goals.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks so much for your time, Elliot. It's just, like I say, just chock full of things, great takeaways. Students watching this on the cusp of a weekend of practice, they're going to have just all these thoughts buzzing through their heads.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Terrific, terrific. All right, well, you take care, and everybody out there have a great week of practicing, and we'll see you back here this same time next Friday. Bye-bye.
You had me at